So the Tokyo Organizing Committee has put forward two versions of the playbook, which is sort of a guidebook for athletes, coaches, staff, media personnel, and other participants in the games regarding the individual coronavirus measures they'll be subjected to during their stay. Everything from sort of tracking their movement, asking participants to get catered food, not use public transportation. To what extent those will be enforced or be effective is up for debate.
Yeah, and they're even talking about tracking foreign reporters' movements via GPS, which has been quite controversial. But is it a way of trying to keep control of the situation?
There were questions raised during a debate at the National Diet last week about how the GPS tracking system can only be used to sort of retrace an individual's movements retroactively rather than track them in real time. And if we're talking about preventing or containing an outbreak of the coronavirus, tracking in real time is really the only useful technology.
You know, it seems such a extraordinary thing that a country that is, and a city that is so challenged by COVID doesn't seem that well prepared for this huge influx of foreigners.
Given foreign spectators have been barred from attending the Tokyo Games, that said, the biggest source of travel from abroad is going to be from the athletes themselves, as well as coaches, staff, and media personnel like you and I. Upwards of tens of thousands of people from more than 200 countries are expected to attend the Tokyo Games next month, and that's not counting more than 70,000 volunteers. So Tokyo is going to see a big surge in traffic. And while not all coronavirus countermeasures have been announced yet or decided upon yet, a lot of questions remain.
You, as a Tokyo resident, there's a state of emergency. Not everyone abides by the rules that are put out. What is your concern when you think of this influx of people?
Yeah, my mind races to the worst case scenario in which the huge influx in travelers to Tokyo triggers a super spreader event. We see dozens of new infections every day that lead to clusters, that lead to huge upticks in COVID-19 patients that possibly push Tokyo's hospitals beyond their limits. On the other hand, the best case scenario is that Tokyo sees no cases during the games. The competitive events are exciting and fun, everybody has a great time, and the closing ceremony reaches Tokyo with no huge issues. I think reality is probably going to be closer to the latter, but I think it's better to prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah. I noticed that up to 10,000 volunteers pulled out. That still leaves about 70,000, but without volunteers, an Olympic Games can be very challenging.
Right, and I think during the Tokyo Games and in all past Olympic and Paralympic Games, the volunteers have been sort of the grease to the machine. They serve all sorts of roles during the events, everything from, I don't know, serving on standby at competitive venues to even managing parking lots. They're all over the place. And while we can only speculate why those 10,000 volunteers dropped out, I think their absence deals a pretty big blow to the morale of the games.
Yeah, and it is interesting because, to your point, the best case scenario could be a morale booster to people in the country. Despite the fact that there's been a lot of local discontent, you've started to see approval for the Games being held, which is now just weeks away, starting to increase. Why do you think that's happened in these dying days of the preparations?
Right. It's been pretty interesting, actually, watching the swelling public support for the Games. As recently as a month ago, in May, we saw numbers like 70%, 80% of the population believing that the Games can't be held safely, should be postponed again or canceled altogether. But then in recent weeks, a week or two ago, there were multiple polls that showed that that number had dropped down to maybe 40, 50%, and that the country was more or less divided based on those public surveys. The initial polls where public opposition was high, experts said, could largely be attributed to the country's slow vaccine rollout. Japan was and is still behind all other industrialized nations for its rate of inoculation. But in recent weeks, the establishment of multiple large-scale vaccine sites, roping in different medical professionals, not all active duty, from different industries, has really accelerated and expanded the rollout, and a lot of experts believe that helped contribute to the more positive attitude among the population towards the games.
A calmer sense that things were getting under control. Good to talk, Ryusei. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.